Hey everybody, Kevin Harnett, John Bowl here. We are keeping an eye on not only the weather and what's been happening across the area today. We're about to hear from emergency services. I know the mayor is coming up with a press conference with the National Weather Service. We'll take that. John Bowl is just back from the hardest hit area. While we were on at 7, you had a couple of fantastic interviews. You talked to a group over at the Oaks at St. Andrews.
Yes.
Now that's an apartment complex.
Yes, a multi-complex apartment complex. And first of all, on the drive over there were already cranes out getting trees off houses.
Wow.
I thought was pretty fascinating, off Manslick. When I pulled into the apartment complex, it goes straight up a hill, and there's just rows and rows of apartment buildings. And when we got up to the very top of it, you could see the very top 2 apartment complexes. Basically what had happened was the roof got blown off of one apartment complex straight into the other one, smashed right into the front of it, knocking out one unit and then taking that roof off as well. And after the first live shot I did, I met a guy named Rich Crawford, who was a maintenance guy, and he had just wandered up the hill.
And he saw it.
He saw the roof come off. He looked over, and at first he thought it was maybe shingles. He was like, wow. He saw the roof come off and blast into the next apartment building. And if you saw earlier in our live shots, you saw that the one of the units, the wall blew right in. And you're thinking, boy, it's a good thing nobody was just inside that wall. And then he tells you there was a guy just inside that wall who was in his bed. And the force of it hitting the apartment building side blew him out of his bed and knocked him clear across his apartment and down the stairs in one fell swoop. And so he ran around, and the guy was at the bottom of the stairs, injured, and took care of him, got authorities over there.
Well, you know, we talked about that one area, and as you mentioned, that was off of Brooklawn Drive. So for folks that are like, where is that in the city? How do we know where it is?
It's Manslick, St. Andrews, not that far really off of Dixie Highway, kind of Dixie Highway down and in by Doss High School.
We have had a number of reports. That was probably the hardest hit. The Red Cross is there. You talked to those folks.
Yeah, they were assessing it, and at that point at 7:50, they didn't know what they were going to do, because we're talking about 50 people here. They had it police taped off. I talked to one woman who walked up, and she said, well, my dog got out because my dog was running loose, but I have no idea how my place is. She handed her phone to a police officer to go around and take a picture. I mean, people don't know what to do at that point around 8 o'clock.
Yeah, and I was on the phone with emergency services as well. That's who we're waiting to hear from. You're going to hear from a number of people on not only what has happened today in Louisville, but what's coming up to help those folks. The Red Cross on scene. They're setting up a shelter for those folks, according to emergency services. That was one of several hard-hit places. John, when we think about this, and you and I joke about this a lot, oh, it's another windy day. Oh, the wind. It's the year of the wind. You know, we hit 79 miles an hour today. That ties the wind speed that we hit on March the 3rd. It's the second strongest wind speed ever recorded in Louisville history.
What is it? What is the threshold for an EF1 tornado? It's not much higher than that, right?
Yeah, the EF1 would go 86 to about 110.
Yeah.
So,
well, I found it interesting. Aren't we talking now, as a National Weather Service, now talking about a possible EF1 tornado?
Well, we had them live on the air. So you were busy gathering for your story and the information on your live shot. But yes, John Gordon was near one of our other reporters, Marissa Burke, and they had surveyed that damage near what was called a Dash Mart. So it's like for DoorDash, where they fulfill the order, send them out. The wall had blown out there. He classified that on the air as an EF1. So that would...
Because it was interesting, because I'm no meteorologist, but that looked exactly like a situation where the tail end of a funnel nipped the highest standing structures on a big hill. But the guy interviewed, if you remember, he said, I was looking right at it at the time, and I didn't see a tornado. Of course, that doesn't mean there wasn't one,
right?
But it sure seemed like one.
Yeah, likely was. But, you know, tornadoes aren't, you know, sometimes we get in our head what the tornado is going to look like.
Yeah,
one funnel.
Wizard of Oz visions.
What happens is sometimes they spin around the outer edge of the parent storm. So that's why it's not a straight line. Sometimes it hits this house but doesn't hit this house. So you can imagine, as this whole storm is turning, the tornado may be on one side or the other as it comes around.
Right.
Yeah, so that we'll hear from the National Weather Service coming up. Let me just take you on a quick picture. That's what we're looking at. That's the Emergency Operations Center. The mayor's going to speak. We know that the National Weather Service is there. They're going to speak. So we will be getting more information from the folks folks there. But I did want to bring you in. I know when we were looking at the storm damage, it wasn't just that apartment complex.
No, but it does seem to be heavily concentrated airport area, southwest extended, doesn't it?
Yes, at least, well, you're saying from the airport, but we had in some instances the same areas hit today as we did last Friday and Saturday. And that was areas over toward Aiken Road, Bush Farm, as you get into Polo Fields, Lake
that's far away.
Forest.
That's far
So, yeah, that's further to the east. We had tornado warnings out for those storms. There have been some damage there, but we know we had several collapses. We mentioned the one at the Dash Mart. That was on Robards Drive. The one you were at was on Brooklawn Drive. We also had over in the industrial park on Cargo Court.
In J-Town?
In J-Town.
Okay.
Yes, that was a roof peeled off of one of the buildings there. In addition to that, we saw at Fern Valley those power lines that were destroyed and hanging barely.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah, it's interesting. You never really know. You can prepare for it, but you never really know, how good a shape your roof or your fence or your tree is in.
Well, and I tell you, with these kinds of winds, even if you're just talking about straight line winds coming in at 70, 80 miles an hour, you're going to have some damage. There's no doubt about it. I think it was a wild picture to see. It was a house that was for sale. It was over off of Heather and Goldsmith. And this huge tree, beautiful home, cut it right in half.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they were supposed to close on the house.
Oh my goodness.
And in like 2 days or something like that. So they're out there, looking at this saying, well, we'll pull up the for sale sign here. Right. Not going to happen.
Well, we're talking in the area I was in those Oaks at St. Andrews. These are people without a lot of money. They'll be the first to tell you that. And then to have taken away, what they had. I mean, there were some really distraught faces. You come up on a lot of tornado scenes or straight line wind scenes, and most of the time, people are very willing to talk to you because they survived.
Right.
This was not the case there. There were a lot of sullen faces there. There were people really upset at what had happened.
Well, I mean, in some cases, you rip the roof off, the rain, it's still raining.
Yeah.
It ruins everything.
Yeah,
you lose it all.
It's right down into all the apartments in every building, and there are many units in each building.
Let's go. Mayor Craig Greenberg is taking the podium, and we'll just kind of listen in as he gets ready. He's got a team assembled around him, and we'll listen in to the latest reports from emergency services out of the city of Louisville. That's John Gordon walking in with the hat on. He's been out surveying the damage. That's the meteorologist in charge from the National Weather Service. He surveyed right up until sunset when you could survey no more.
How many spots was he able to hit?
I know he was at 3, and he was going to try to get to a couple more before actual sunset. And again, Mayor Craig Greenberg, the city of Louisville, at the podium, making sure everybody is set. And he's going to give us a briefing on what has happened. Here we go.
Good evening. We are here tonight in the Metro Emergency Operations Center, where we've been monitoring and responding to the serious weather activity that took place earlier this evening across our city. I want to stress that everything we're talking about this evening from all of us is still preliminary in nature, as all of our respective agencies and department assess the damage and gather more detail about what happened throughout our city tonight. First, it's with a heavy heart that I'm reporting that we believe there is one fatality that is potentially related to the storm that happened in the Dixie Highway area in southern Louisville. The coroner's department will provide more information and will be the ones to confirm the information after they have alerted the family and made final conclusion. However, our thoughts tonight are with the family of that individual who passed this evening, potentially related to the storm. According to the National Weather Service, an EF1 tornado touched down in the Newburgh area earlier this evening at 5:05 p.m. And as you'll hear from John Gordon from the National Weather Service in just a minute, it would not surprise us if tomorrow or in the days coming, the National Weather Service confirms that more than one tornado touched down across Jefferson County. Much of the damage reports that we have right now are from the south and southwestern parts of our city. There are a lot of trees down, there are power lines down, and also buildings have sustained damage. 2 apartment buildings on Brooklawn Drive off of Dixie Highway and in South Louisville. Several residents there have been displaced due to the serious damage that the storm inflicted on those buildings. And you'll hear shortly from Steve Cunanan, the CEO of the Red Cross, who is going to talk about some of the services they are providing to those residents who have been displaced this evening as a result of damage to that apartment building. Also, one individual was taken from that apartment with injuries to the hospital. So that individual is currently in the hospital as a result of injuries sustained to the Brooklawn Drive apartments. As I mentioned, you'll hear from Steve momentarily about Red Cross, who's on the scene, providing help to all of the individuals who have been displaced as a result of the storm. We've been taking 911 calls in our emergency operations center here this evening. We've had significant activity between 4:30 and 8:30. There were 1,265 911 calls that we took. Most of those calls came in during the 5 o'clock hour. That's approximately 2 times the expected activity. Just to put that in perspective, we received 632 calls during that same time frame last week. So we had twice as many 911 calls this evening. We currently have reports of 13 blocked roads across the city due to downed trees, plus additional closures as a result of power lines. So right now, our public works crews are surveying and assessing all of the damage, and will be working to restore and reopen all of the roadways. If you have information and want to report a blocked roadway, please call 574-2111 extension 5. Again, if you have a blocked roadway to report, please call 574-2111 extension 5. Tonight we have with us several folks. I'm joined here by Deputy Mayor James, who was on the scene earlier this evening at the Brooklawn Apartments, where he was working with other emergency agencies and assessing the damage there. We also have John Gordon from the National Weather Service, Natasha Collins from LG&E, Chief Jason Myman with PRP Fire, Chief Fredericks from Louisville Fire, and Steve Cunanan from the Red Cross. So first, I'm going to turn it over to John Gordon from the National Weather Service, who can give some more detail about what occurred earlier this evening in Louisville. John?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hate severe weather. I like sunny San Diego weather, and unfortunately we had the combination of warm air, fuel, and a lot of wind shear. Like the mayor said, I believe there's more than one tornado, so that's what we know. So I started my journey. There's damage in the plant side industrial park, and there's some structures in there. That's straight line wind damage. Then I went to Newburgh by Gardner Lane and Robarb's clear-cut tornado. So you have wind damage from the trees and from the insulation pattern from the north-northeast to the east-southeast. That was on a line. When you get a line of storms, you get these little nubs, and they rotate from the northeast to the southeast. We issued a lot of warnings. We actually, you might have noticed, we issued a severe thunderstorm warning initially and upgraded to 80 miles an hour. What happens when you issue 80-mile-per-hour winds? It goes off on this sucker, WEA, the Weather Emergency Alert, and that was for 80-mile-an-hour winds. We had 78 miles per hour at Ali International. March 3rd, we had 79 miles an hour. I've never seen a windier year ever in my life than this winter going into the early spring. So right now we got an EF1, 90 miles an hour. It was really hard to figure out the width. I'm going to say 100 yards right now. It's preliminary. I like that word, preliminary. And I'm not sure really where it ends. I'm going to be out tomorrow for sure in PRP. I know at various places in the county. I'm pretty confident. I'll use the word compelling that there's at least one more tornado in the county, and we'll have that confirmed tomorrow. And I'm so sad about the loss of life and the injuries. Severe weather is the worst thing we have, one of the worst things we have in our beautiful city. And I like sunny San Diego weather, and there's no bad weather in the next 7 days. Thank you, Lord.
Thank you very much, John. I know folks across the city have been impacted with some power outages. It's interesting. If you look at where the power outages are right now, you can see a line going across nearly our entire city through starting in the south and southwest, going across the middle of our city. So Natasha is from LG&E is going to join us with an update on power outages and restoration.
Thanks a lot, Mayor Greenberg. As the mayor said, our outage map basically tells the story of what our service territory is looking like. You can see we have outages across the LG&E service territory that just follow the line of where the storm went. We do have at last check about 18,000 customers who have been impacted by the storm. At last check, we also had more than 200 wire downs across the service territory. And while we'll still be getting a count as our crews are out in the field, we also obviously have broken poles that go along with that. We do have about 250 field resources that are out there working, and additional resources that are headed this way, just as we reposition our crews to make sure that we're able to get customers' service back up and running for them. In the meantime, our message is safety as always. So safety first, not just for our crews, but for the public and our customers. Make sure that if you come across a wire down, you treat it as an energized power line. Stay away. Give us a call. The number is 502-589-1444. Also, our app is a great resource. If your phones are charged, you can make sure that you go to the app. You can report your outage, get on our outage map, watch the weather and how the system is impacted as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Natasha, to you and all of your colleagues at LG&E for jumping right into the restoration effort. Next, let me introduce Chief of PRP Fire, Jason Myman, who has been on the scene in PRP. As I mentioned earlier, he and Deputy Mayor James were on the scene at the Brooklawn Lane Apartments earlier this evening, and he's going to fill us in on some of the damage that he's seen in some of the efforts. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So aside from the normal incidents the Pleasant Ridge Park Fire Department responded to, we responded to well over 25 incidents specific to the storm. Several of those incidents could have included an additional 10 incidents, meaning that one incident was basically a neighborhood. There were several neighborhoods that had a lot of extensive damage with a lot of trees on the houses, a lot of power poles down, and then as the mayor indicated, Brooklawn apartment complex is where we sustained a lot of the significant damage. The residents and the community of Pleasant Ridge Park, I really got to commend them. They did an excellent job assisting with all the emergency responders. All the residents were either assisted out by the firefighters in the Brooklawn neighborhood, or they self-rescued. So there were no entrapments in those buildings at all, and I'd like to make that clear. But I do need to commend the residents of Pleasant Ridge Park for allowing the responders to get in and do their jobs. I'd also like to thank Oklahoma Fire Department and Jeffersontown Fire Department, who assisted us with all of our efforts on clearing clearing the path to make it safe for all the residents in PRP. So I believe that's about it.
Chief, thanks to you and all of the first responders for tonight's emergency activity, but also all severe weather events and the response. Next, Steve Cunanan is the regional CEO of the American Red Cross, who's going to talk a little bit about their important activities in response to tonight's storms. Steve?
Thank you, Mayor Greenberg. The Red Cross is right now in the process of responding to multiple calls around the area. A majority of our activity right now is in the Brooklawn area where the apartment had been damaged. And what we are doing is partnering with MetroSafe. And as of tonight, we have opened 20 cases. And those are cases for sheltering, there are cases for food, and there are cases for emergency assistance. We'll continue to go ahead and provide assistance to those residents, and we're in the process right now of settling them into temporary housing. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Steve, to you and everyone at the Red Cross. And also next up is Chief Fredericks from the Louisville Fire Department, who's going to talk a little bit about safety, prevention, and precautions to take. Chief?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. First of all, this incident started around time for meal preparation for dinner. So I want to, first thing is remind everybody, go to your stove and make sure it's turned off. So if your power is out and it comes back on in the middle of the night, you don't end up with your stove on causing a fire. Also want to remind you, don't use candles. I know those of you that have power outages, check your smoke alarms, make sure they're in working order. And if you're using a generator, don't bring it in the house, don't bring it in the garage, keep it at least 20 feet away from your dwelling. Be aware of carbon monoxide as well. And as Natasha said, stay away from down tree limbs and any down power lines that may be out in your yard and around in your neighborhood. So just like to ask you to use caution and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. Very important advice, and I would just encourage everyone to follow these safety warnings. They might sound foreign to some folks, or that's not going to impact people feel like it's not going to impact them. Well, it does. As you hear tonight, we unfortunately are mourning a loss of life this evening. An individual was injured this evening as a result of the storm. And so I encourage everyone to please heed the warnings. Tonight, stay away from any down power lines, as Natasha said earlier, and please make sure you report them. Check on your neighbors. They might not have power. They might have been impacted. So please check on your neighbors and loved ones, family and friends, to make sure they're okay. And in the future, when we have additional severe weather events, listen to the warnings as I was mentioning. When you hear, we had a tornado warning. The sirens went off across the city this evening. When you hear those warnings, take shelter. Sign up for the Lens Alert. That's how I first found out about the severity of the storm, was my cell phone Lens Alert went off. So please, you can text Lens Alert. That's LENSALERT. You can text Lens Alert to 67283. I encourage everyone in Louisville to sign up for Lens Alert. Anytime there's a loss of life, it's a tragic event. So tonight our hearts are with the family of individual who deceased. We are wishing our speedy thoughts and prayers to our neighbor who was injured this evening as a result of the storm. The coroner will provide more information tomorrow or in the coming days. All of our agencies will have additional information throughout the night, and as daybreak comes, and we're, as you heard, able to assess damage more in the morning. And so we will certainly have more information to share with you tomorrow. But in the meantime, right now, we're happy to take any questions that you all might have. Any questions?
I have a quick question. While we were out interviewing some folks in PRP, we were told from some individuals that they didn't hear a siren go off until about 20 minutes after the storm had already hit. Do you have any information about why that could have been?
I don't have any information on the timing yet. We'll get back to you on that. We don't have any information on that. That's all. All right. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.
All right, you've just been listening to Mayor Craig Greenberg along with Deputy Mayor David James, National Weather Service meteorologist in charge John Gordon, Chief Fredericks from Louisville Fire,
Natasha Collins
and Steve Cananan from the Red Cross. They were all sort of gathered together because of what has unfolded. We want to show you some video that we have from our fleet. Again, you're going to notice the location you were at, John. This is the roof blown off. The mayor, recapping what he said, we do have one fatality that's been reported near the Dixie Highway area, assuming that it is weather related. The coroner will have more information on that tomorrow. An EF1 tornado has touched down near the Newburgh neighborhood, a good part of the south and southwest part of the city without power, with trees and power lines down.
Yeah, as you look at this video, by the way, so you understand what happened here, on the left, that roof was blown off and thrown to the right and took out the front of the apartment building facing that apartment building. and a man was injured in the apartment building that got struck. But you can look right down into all these homes. Look at that. And then, of course, it's been raining nonstop ever since.
Yeah, and everything would just be destroyed. The mayor saying that there are 13 blocked roads, additional closures because of power lines. If you need to report blocked roads, he's urged folks to call 574-2111, extension 5.
And of course, we have a fatality reported along the Dixie Highway area. We don't know very much about that. But what's interesting in this particular weather event is there are multiple spots across the Louisville area that got hit. Now, John Gordon said he first stopped in the J-Town area and was able to determine that was straight line winds. Next stop was in the Newburgh area, and he said that was probably definitely an EF1.
He went on to say that more surveys would be conducted tomorrow because they ran out of daylight, and he was all but saying there will be more.
Yeah, especially as you look there at the Brooklawn.
Yeah,
apartments
that just is terrible.
Yeah.
We have other video that's come in from our drones. This one was off of that. It's a DoorDash fulfillment center, essentially. So it's the Dash Mart. You can see this one. It looks like wind probably got on the inside somehow and just blew that wall out. The top of that roof is still intact. The tractor trailers are still standing, but that one back wall completely blown out.
Isn't that interesting how that happened? I mean, you've just got one structural flaw there and everything else held up just fine. Even looking at the trees, see a couple of busted branches, but not bad.
Yeah, and I suppose once you get something like that tipping over, there's no stopping it, a heavy cinder block wall. Once again, the EF1 tornado with 90-mile-per-hour winds estimated preliminarily, and this will get updated too, but at least 100 yards at this point. We have the LG&E power outage map that we want to show you.
Yeah,
you can almost see the path
You sure can.
of the strongest winds just based on the power.
Yeah, looking at the clusters of the power outages, you can see it is just, a line just south of the Watterson running from J-Town, where we were just talking about, and going right down, all the way down to, Preston Highway. And then you have another cluster in the PRP area where we've been talking about, and then Dixie Highway.
Natasha Collins from LG&E was talking, what a year they've had when you think back to the windstorm, the severe weather, the storms that we had the other night with power outages, and now we're dealing with 19,547, the majority of those in Jefferson County without power.
And a very important point raised by the fire chief. This happened right just after 5 at dinner time. A lot of people might have had their stoves on. Then your power gets knocked out. If the power comes back on in the middle of the night, that could cause a major problem. So go and check your stove and make sure it's off.
And that's so important because oftentimes what happens, you get it. Middle of the night, you're asleep, power comes back on. Guess what else comes back on?
That is a major danger source right there.
We heard from Steve Cananan, the regional vice president with the American Red Cross. They've had quite a couple of years when you think back to the tornadoes in West Kentucky, you think to the flooding in East Kentucky, the in-between things that we've had. And now tonight, they are housing some 50 people, sheltering them, providing food, providing emergency assistance, including that temporary housing for at least 50 people from that apartment complex that we mentioned. This is the Oaks at St. Andrews. He was saying that the majority of the folks they're helping coming from this location. This is likely where the fatality also occurred. I don't want to say that with assurance because they just told us off of Dixie, but this was the hardest hit place off of Dixie.
Yes, it was. Now, when I talked to the maintenance guy there, he said the only injury he knew of was in the building, not in your foreground, but in the background when the roof blew off and smashed into the front of that now on your right. But he said everybody was home in all of those apartments on the right when the roof came off and crashed into their complex.
And I tell you, that wind, regardless if it's straight line or tornadic, by looking at this damage, we can garner some information. We're looking for a different direction. You'll notice there's no debris in the back parking lot. It's all in one direction, and that's what the Weather Service will be doing. When they go out to survey these storms, they're looking for a path of where the debris is going. And in this instance, it appears to all be pushed into one area. Look, in fact, how that was pushed into that.
And I showed you on Wave News at 7. It went left to right as you're looking at this. Into that apartment and then to the right. So that was a northerly, I believe.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, we're just looking at one little snapshot. They
Right.
look at a much bigger picture because the the size of what could have been the tornado would be larger than just looking at that one apartment complex.
Okay, so Natasha Collins with LG&E said they have about 250 crews out working on this. Let's put this into a bigger context, though. The windstorm everybody thinks of always was 2008 or 9, the
Yes.
hurricane coming
Yeah,
up.
followed by the ice storm
Followed by
that
the
topped
other storm
that.
that topped that.
Yeah.
But what did the windstorm caused by the hurricane track top out at for winds? Do you remember?
That was like 72,
72?
I think something. Yeah, 72.
And that caused widespread
Oh
outages.
gosh, yeah. Now that was that was a much wider area.
Right.
So that's the important part to remember. Even when we compare this to just a few 33 days ago,
Right.
when we were looking at March the 3rd and we had that windstorm, it was over a much larger area than what we're talking about today. This is a pretty narrow corridor. It's where an actual tornado was versus where the gradient winds that hit everybody were.
This was was it not, typical spring weather event with the timing? Well, the last one was in the middle of the night. Isn't this about when it's supposed to happen?
Yeah, we're definitely in severe weather season. April into May, our peak months, sometimes lingers into early June. So we're there. This
Yeah.
is it.
This is 5 p.m.
And what a time. Good or bad, with spring break in place, some people aren't home. Some people were home. At least buses weren't on the roads. So there may be some good out of that. The bad news is, John, and one thing that always hits is when there is a fatality.
Yeah.
You think, could we have done more? Could we have been on longer? Could we have, what more could we have done in the broadcast world to get people's attention? It's the reason we started alert days, because we know the world is noisy and people, it's tough to get people's attention.
But a lot of people don't have the luxury of a typical house and going in the basement. I mean, think about, as we just showed that drone video, those people in those apartments, like, where do they go?
Well, and that's it. You have to have a plan.
Yeah.
If you're in an apartment complex, you've got to have a plan. It's the lowest level. You may not survive, and in fact, someone likely didn't survive being in the top floor of that apartment complex.
Yeah, just
It's not a safe place.
looking at it, being there, I thought initially there's probably going to be at least one fatality here.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We've certainly ended the severe weather for tonight. We've got a little bit of rain still out there, but the rain will gradually end, moving to our south, and temperatures will be much cooler as we work our way into tomorrow, warming back up by the Easter weekend.
Second event in 4 days, in 4 nights. Yeah.
Yeah, and some places hit twice because they had some wind and the tornado warning, even in that same spot today versus last.
Well, the
Friday and
zone of
Saturday.
expectation that you've been showing us for 2 days was the same spot. This unfolded exactly the way you thought it would.
Well, you never know if it's going to happen. All we know, and we can say with the education we have, is it's probable.
Yeah.
There's a chance, and your job is to be prepared. Our job will be to get the warning out as fast as we can, and to give you advance warning. So that's the hope.
We're going to put
we're going
together.
to have a lot more on this.
Yeah, we're gonna put together everything we have for tonight at 11. So make sure you join us. There are some stunning visuals. Again, to recap: 1 fatality, 13 blocked roads, 18,000 people without power, and a lot of work to do and more assessment of exactly how intense this storm was.
Yeah, we're coming up on 9:30. We're going to say goodbye for now. We've got the news to do tonight at 11. We'll see you on Wave News at 11. For John Bowl, I'm Kevin Harnett. We appreciate you choosing Wave.